I guess it was like 60 to 80 foot fall before that. So it's like survivable, but very, very scary, to now like you're way over on the slab and you felt like maybe you're gonna die, but it was really easy. Welcome back to another Ask Lattice. We're on the sofa again today, and Maddy and I are gonna kind of do a bolt-on follow-up from a webinar that we both did a while back, which was on the topic of mental games for climbing. And we kind of did that one a little bit more on trad climbing, and that was a more specific focus on the topic. But today we're gonna answer a load of questions that you all have posed to us on a broader sort of topic area around bouldering, sport climbing, trad, the whole lot. And we've got 4 pretty good questions here to go through. And we've also got a sort of like an intro just to kind of kick us off question as well. So I don't know whether we've got like an answer that particularly shares on anything, but maybe it'll be a funny story. I'm kind of looking forward to see what you got to say. And that is, what is the most scared you've ever got on a route or just going climbing? It could be bouldering.
Yeah, I do actually get quite scared going bouldering. Yeah, I think for me, I mean, after however many years of climbing, there's probably lost lots of memories hidden away somewhere deep where you hope they won't surface again. But I think one that really stands out for me was actually when I first started climbing bigger sort of granite climbs in the Alps. So I was really new to sort of multi-pitching, and we went to L'Anvers, I think, bad French accent, which is actually like quite friendly, and did a multi-pitch, and I don't know what the grade was, maybe it was sort of around 7A plus, but there was this realisation that they're given sport grades, the pitches, even though they're not sport routes. So I sort of headed off around the corner away from my Belia and was just faced with this granite slab, which are like, I don't know if you've been there, like the slabs feel hard for the grade and the cracks feel easy for the grade. I think they were like good at slab climbing. Okay. Anyway, you stand on a ledge and there was just one hand placed peg, I think, or something like that, and then the whole pitch just sort of was unprotected above. Okay. And I think I was just sort of like, my belay, all they could hear was just like, you know, when you're like, watch me, but trying to keep that sort of quiver out of your voice. Okay. Yeah, that was probably mine. And actually, he was also, when he came round and seconded me, he was really scared. And I think we only did one more pitch than we have done. Yeah, we quit for the day. We were a bit fried.
It's basically, I call that type 3 fun, which is like the one that you never really come back from. Yeah. And it never even your mind was fun. It was actually really unfun.
Yeah, but it definitely made me appreciate the difference between like how hard a pitch might be and how hard it could feel if you took away all the bolts. You know, it was like a 7A, but just taking away all the bolts. Yeah. How about you?
Mine was actually a kind of like a slabby experience, but it was in the Czech Republic where they've got like these sandstone towers and you trad climb them, but on like knotted slings, and you like, it just all seems a bit sketchy, and it's not very familiar to us as British climbers, and we're not allowed to use chalk either. And there was a sort of quite a well-known route you'd have a go at if you thought you were quite good at crack climbing, through a big steep overhang, and I'd like really psyched myself up for it, and I climbed it and did well all the way through the hard section, and finally like got through this long run out bit and got onto the top slabs, and I was like, oh my goodness, I've survived, I've done it, phew, I never have to do that again. And by that point I'd completely switched off from everything and I just expected it to be a cruise, but actually above it was really sandy, dirty, and no more. And it was no longer like, I guess it was like 60 to 80 foot fall before that. So it's like survivable, but very, very scary, to now like you're way over on the slab and you felt like maybe you're gonna die, but it was really easy, but very sandy.
No knot placements then.
Yeah, like no knots. And I just completely freaked out because I didn't expect it to be hard anymore. And I just lost my head. And it was horrible. I never want to have that again.
I guess that's often the downfall, isn't it? When you don't expect something to be that bad. Because I guess for me, I didn't expect it to be that scary. But yeah, I guess that's probably what we'll
I think this
touch
might come up
upon a lot
today.
throughout. Common theme.
Okay, so first question, and this one's a little bit more sort of simple in terms of expectations, and maybe it has some stuff which isn't just sort of mind games or mental tips. Is what do we think are some good tips for trad climbers when they're going out and doing their first lead trad experiences? What would we sort of pass on to those climbers?
Yeah, so I guess when we're first starting out with trad climbing, I think there's a big sort of learning curve at the start with placing gear. And so I guess the first thing is to get really confident with that. And that can be through your climbing partner checking it, someone that you trust, as well as I think seconding and taking out gear. Like that was something I found really useful. And I guess on a trad climbing day out, often people take it in turns to lead. So as I was sort of learning and placing my gear on lead and having that checked, sort of at the same time I was seconding slightly harder routes, which was getting me used to the climbing style outside of trad climbing, as well as allowing me to look at where my partner had placed gear and how they'd chosen to climb the route. And I think that really helped my sort of learning to trad climb initially.
So that's interesting that you found that really useful for you when you were doing your kind of earlier years of trad climbing, because I'm very similar in the way that it was about how to handle and deal with the sort of the trad gear placement. But I found the kind of the one thing that just absolutely solved it for me was going out, and every time I was going trad climbing, is I'd just go along the base of the crag and I would place gear in every possible place that I could, almost from like a 1 out of 10 that was just awful, and just find out what would almost just take your body weight to total bomber pieces, and I just treat it like a game. Yeah. And if you do that,
sort of like a puzzle,
session after session, that massively helped me.
I actually think that was a really good thing that I used to do often before setting off on a lead in the sort of early days of trad climbing, because before you're on the route and having to hold positions and put them in, you've already sort of got your eye in a little bit at the base, placing some gear. But I guess I still think that a big part of what sort of adds to the sort of learning to trad climb experience is being on a route at the same time as having to place it. So I guess that's where I think watching other people and where they choose to place gear, and looking for what for you is a less stressful position to place from, because that might be different. I remember the partner I started climbing with, he was happy to hang on bigger jugs and place gear, whereas I'd probably often think, once my feet are on these holds, then I will feel quite comfortable. And I guess sort of incorporating that early on I found quite useful, because you spend less time trying to place gear in hard positions.
Yeah. Because I found that after I'd kind of got that confidence with how to place all the gear in lots of different scenarios, was that the next stage to build from that was where I could just go from being way inside my physical comfort level. So my physical ability on a route was, I could climb a lot harder, but it was scary. Was to then just do a tiny bit of basically resting and fall practice on routes, and just doing mini falls, mini slumps, just hang on some gear for a little bit.
And just get used to the feeling.
But I did find that had to be you couldn't just do 2 falls on trad and that was it, you were solved. No. It was more 50, 100 falls over a season. And then I would start to develop quite a lot of confidence. So for me, I didn't solve it just by a couple of falls. It took time.
I actually probably didn't even do that early on in my trad climbing, but sort of went for, do you think learning to trad climb is a bit of a long game, isn't it? And something that I found really useful, not necessarily taking falls, but was to not sort of overdo it any day. I guess I found it quite tiring, mentally tiring. I even know that actually going back to trad climbing after this period of lockdown, not trad climbed for ages, you go out, you maybe do a couple of routes, and I think it's knowing to be okay, that was enough for that day. I've learned a lot. I'm now quite mentally tired. I'm not going to reinforce any sort of getting scared by pushing on and doing more. And I think when you're learning anything new, then that's maybe quite a good approach to take.
Epics happen at the end of the day.
Epics happen at the end of the day.
Basically, yeah. Okay, right. That was a a reasonable lead-in now to
Yeah.
a tricky one. And this question is posed by Duncan, who has asked, what are our tips for dealing with the pressure of the big on-site? So those on-sites that it's always like, I'm saving the on-site, and you save it for 5 years, or something that's right at your limit, or a total world classic that everyone wants to on-site. And me and you have done enough of this, like, what do we do?
Some of them failed on others.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a really hard one, because when it comes to an on-site that you've saved, it's a very one-off opportunity. Like, you go for your red point and don't get it one day, you can come back. And I guess I've taken a bit of like a multifaceted approach, and that is actually thinking about how to prepare for it. I guess a lot of people are like, yeah, I'm really saving this on-site. And it's like, okay, that's fine, but when do you decide when you're ready? And I guess actually actively thinking about that is a step that I don't hear that many people talking about. Like, what routes like sort of logically lead into it? Like, say you want to on-site London Wall, like what routes at Millstone are really good to do to build up into it, to get used to the style. And I think setting yourself something out like that makes them this slightly less mythical thing that you're trying to aim for, this sort of elusive on-site. And also I think it means you're less likely to just rush into it in an impatient way. I know a lot of, and I've definitely done this myself, I'm like, I'm saving it, and then it's like, I'm bored of saving it, I'm just going to go for it. Oh, I wasn't ready, I fell off. Yeah. And I think that actually deciding when you're ready and setting out some like pretty good sort of, I don't know, benchmarks for when that is, like being well practiced on on-site climbing at levels leading up to that is a good way to go. I don't know, have you done that in a sort of methodical way for anything?
Yes, I think I'm like you. I've got some of my on-sites done that I really wanted to do, and I held them up in sort of like high esteem in my personal, like cabinet of things I wanted to achieve, and I got them, but at least half of them I've completely messed up, and really badly messed up, and I'm like, what I was doing. And in those cases where it did go wrong, I would say most of those scenarios were when I hadn't done that thing you talk about, like the preparation beforehand. And I think a lot of people spend their time trying to take the same approach they do with like red pointing and projects, and chunking it down, breaking it down, and analysing it. What level of fitness do I need? How do I do that movement style? All these different things. But actually, I think it's the path and the base that leads into it, which is what we need to put the majority of our focus in.
Yeah, a bit more of a sort of experience build up. Yeah, like I think
there's a bit of a difference between on-site versus red pointing that way.
And I think that is partly like the speed at which you can place gear. Like, I wouldn't go for an on-site that I'd really been saving without having just done a good amount of on-siting in that season, like in the lead up, because you just get slicker at placing gear. Because like you said, it's a bit of a sort of almost like a numbers game, isn't it? Like, do you make a mistake? How many mistakes do you make? And that's what sort of maybe means you'll either be successful or you might get too pumped and fail. And I think that you can look to minimise those in that slightly more sort of building a good base of experience. But like you said, I think a certain amount of what you want to be able to be aware of is your like mental preparation as well. And that could be like partly the lead up, or just how you feel on a given day. Like sometimes
it is choosing what's right on the day.
Yeah,
as
like
well.
On a day, like I guess a lot of people that they might have like saved it for the on-site, and then, they might go one weekend and be like, I've got to do it this weekend. And I think rather than thinking that, being like, do I want to do it this weekend, or do I feel like I'm in a good sort of headspace to do it this weekend, and being sort of willing to walk away and leave it, and that's okay, and that's sort of part of the game of saving something.
Yeah. Well, you just get to chat about it for even longer then, don't you? And then all your friends get to be more frustrated that you still haven't had a go at it. So
yeah. Or like you said, the fact that if you do not make it and fail, then that is part of on-siting. Mistakes are made, it's in the moment, and I guess it's just to realise that is, a potential outcome of it when you do get on it, and that's okay.
And most of the good on-site climbers that I know have failed on loads of those on-sites. It's just, again, part of that process. You haven't got to be suddenly thinking that you've got to achieve 90% of the things you've got to go for. I just don't think it's the reality.
Yeah. I don't know if you've done this, I often sort of like separate out those ones as well into safe ones and more dangerous ones. Like what is the on-site testing? Because then maybe I'm a bit more relaxed about the safe ones. If you get pumped and fall but it's safe, then that's okay. Yeah. And maybe you can sort of, go for those on any weekend, but if they're a bit more dangerous, maybe give it a bit more respect to...
Make sure you're going well.
Yeah.
Okay, so I hope that helps, Duncan, and gives you a few things to think about and go away with. Next question, and this kind of relates back to on-site as well again, and potentially as well for some of the competition climbers watching, is around what we recommend to do to stay calm in both the sort of pre-route, pre-boulder, pre-comp routine, and then whilst we're kind of in it and in the moment.
Yeah, so I think there's probably a lot of different methods that people use here, and I know that we're like maybe a bit different in how we sort of approach this area. So I guess just to start, it's whatever we say works for us. I think it's definitely a process of trying them out and sort of seeing what works for any person. I definitely like quite a sort of calm and focus approach. I know that some people maybe more like to get like psyched up, and I think that I can usually climb my best in any given moment if I can be quite calm and focused, like focusing on breathing a little bit or on sort of everything I do in the lead up to getting on a route. So for me, like tying in, I guess for a boulder, it'd maybe be putting on your shoes, but using that as a time to really sort of hone in on what you're doing in the moment and slightly start to like blank out everything around you. But I think you're maybe a little different.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's it comes down to, I mean, we do climb somewhat similar styles of routes and things, and I feel like, particularly with some of the kind of like crack specialization and the kind of like more of a, you feel like you're going into battle or you're like fighting your way up these things.
True.
I feel like sometimes I have to develop a sort of a higher energy approach with it. But I definitely find that in terms of like the calmness thing is that I do need a level of calmness like Maddy, and just also see this as being a good approach for the vast majority of climbers that are going into a situation and climbing well, and also doing well under pressure, is being able to practice and have a routine to being able to achieve it, but also being able to know what it feels like when you're in that state.
Yeah.
So when I talk to anyone that I go climbing with, and I can kind of like, and we just chat about this at the crag, if you talk to them about whether it's, pre-climb or in the climb and that calmness element, you'll find when you delve into it, they think about it loads and they practice it loads and they've done it for lots and lots of years. So it's not like they've got some sort of secret formula. They're just very well practiced at it.
And I think, that's a really good point you make there, actually. I think like recognizing when you're not calm is a really, because, I don't get particularly stressed or fearful every time I go out climbing, but it might be for a certain route, or it might just be because it is some random day. Obviously it's recognizing those times when you are feeling maybe slightly more fearful, not quite as relaxed, maybe you will overgrip. And I think if you can recognize that, even as early, like sometimes I can recognize it before I even step on the rock. And it's not to be preemptive, sort of trying to prescribe how you feel, but if you have some certain techniques or sort of, mental training methods or a bit of a routine that you can really sort of, bring in when you recognize those times. I think that that's a really good sort of base of experience to build up, is to actually like think about when you feel good and when you feel relaxed, and think about when you feel more anxious. And I guess, say like after a busy day of work, if you feel more anxious, you might just choose not to go and do your hard red point. That could just be like a behavioral thing. But if it's a more recurring thing, then you can really start to apply whatever techniques work for you.
Yeah. And like, I think like if I was going to pin one thing on it in terms of like the calmness element and being the right mental space for any form of climbing, I would say for me, underpinning all of it is just a basic breathing method.
Yeah, I think.
And just being, I'm not into this whole thing. I like sit there with my legs crossed, doing some kind of meditation. I'm not that type of person. I'm not into that particularly. But if I really look at what I'm doing, I've got a really calm, very even breathing rate, and I have it for some time before I set off.
And it's such a simple link between our sort of, like fear levels and sort of something we can control. I think that's why like the breathing is really interesting. And I think it can seem like a really broad term, can't it, to like focus on your breathing, but everyone's different. Like, do you sort of more feel the rise and fall of your chest, or do you sort of, sometimes I might blow out in quite like a calm, a calm, even way, and you're sort of listening to the sound of your breathing. There might be all sorts of things that you choose to focus on, which would still be different for everyone.
Yeah. No, oh God, I mean, I think there's a whole, subject all about breathing and methods for that. It's a big thing.
I guess one other thing that's like a bit less of a practical note and like more of a mindset thing, which I think maybe you do as well, and I might just really focus on the intent of why I'm there. I think sometimes when you're getting close to a project or there is something you really care about, there is a tendency to think about having done it or how you'll feel when you've done it or something. And I think when you're at the bottom looking up, just to think about climbing your best or remembering why you chose to try this route, or and even communicating that to your partner, your climbing partner, and having that be quite an open part of your climbing day. I think that really helps me.
Yeah, focus on performance, not the goal.
Yeah.
As I think either me or Pete said, whatever it was, like 10 years ago or something like that.
Yeah.
Seems like a long time ago. Okay, last question is, and this is another good route climbers one here. Don't think it would apply to boulderers. Is what do we do to prepare for leaving a ledge, a big rest point on a route? And we might have been there, shaking out, resting for 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 minutes. Sometimes it's a really good rest.
15 minutes, 20.
Yeah, like, what do we do?
Your delayers just thinking that they might just take you off and walk away.
Yeah, the poor person stuck there.
Yeah, so I think like ledge fever is, hard, can be hard to overcome. Like, when do you decide when to leave? And I guess what we're talking about here is often you could stay there indefinitely, so you know that you can recover fully, and it's putting some sort of time limit on that to make sure that there's some time when you say, okay, I'm ready to go now. And I think something I've found quite useful with this is to really use the physical sort of feelings I might have had from climbing up to a ledge as a little bit of a cue for when my mental preparation starts. So I allow myself sort of 2 phases on the ledge. So you reach the ledge, I'm pumped. Yeah. I know that I can wait and I can shake out there, and I can often look at my foot, your forearms have a look when you arrive and you look pumped, and mine very much return back to a normal sort of appearance, like the veins disappear, you know what it means, you're not getting that sort of throbbing feeling in your arms anymore. Once that goes and I know that I'm probably physically ready to leave, then I allow myself a short mental preparation window where I maybe go through, like we said before, a little bit of a few sets of breathing. I maybe feel my chalk in my hands a little bit and get them like well chalked up. That helps me feel like I'm quite ready to tackle the next section. And if it is a hard crux and I'm literally standing on a ledge, I also might just go through a bit of mental sort of visualization of the moves, really sort of building in the sort of, a level of arousal that I want for the moves. Because I think something I find really hard is that on the ledge you get really calm, but often you step off the ledge and you need to like be ready to pull again, especially if it's the crux. And that's something I've really struggled with. So trying to build that sort of psyching up into the visualizing the moves above me, I found really useful.
That's interesting. That probably will. So I have quite a different approach to that, and this will probably come down to our difference in personalities. Is that I can get to the ledge and get really sort of like amped up and overthink and get almost got too anxious about what lies ahead. And I always find the best that I do on kind of like my ledge preparation is that when I'm ready to go and it actually goes very well above it, is that I've gone completely blank in my mind. And I've got to this point where I'm not thinking about the moves anymore. I'm just not thinking about anything. I'm just completely blank, and I go into like, autopilot almost, but I can only do that if the sequence above or the danger or how hard or how bad I feel about the fall above the bolt, I've dealt with that on the ground. So I have to have done that way back down the ground scenario, so then I can get into the very blank,
just autopilot
thing higher up.
Yeah, I do think I've probably used that, but I guess often one of the times when I struggle with like leaving a ledge or performing above a ledge, I guess, is when there's quite a stark contrast. Like you stood on a ledge, I know that I'm quite good at calming myself down. I know I can calm myself down. Yet when I pull on, it's being like maybe ready to like actually climb those moves. And I think that's where I can often sort of suddenly find myself a bit flustered because I'm in this very calm state and it's not quite well matched to the level of climbing.
Too
that I'm
out.
suddenly, Having said that, when I go to leave the ledge, like, you know, going back to the breathing thing, and this will be interesting to see what you think. I've thought about the breathing and like calming it down, but often when I go to step off, I usually try and do like a good outward breath. I feel like that's the most calming part of the breathing for me. So if I like breathe out and then step up, then I find that like seems to sort of, I don't know, that's my marker of being ready. I guess that's the thing, isn't it? It's to develop any cue of like, after this point, I am going, like when this outward breath finishes, I am going to start climbing. That is my cue. Or like once I've finished talking up and dusted my hands together, whatever it is for anyone, I am going to step on and, you know, it's sort of like seeing your green light at the traffic lights.
Yeah, interesting. So I am also very aware of the breathing thing, but I will, for me, my personal cue is I will make a point and I'll go, right, now I'm going to do one more chalk up at my left and one more chalk up my left, one more chalk up on my right. That's it, I am going. Yeah. And I will allow, that probably gives me like 10 seconds, but I do give myself like I'll cut myself, you know, a line and then I'm going and I'm good.
And I think that's probably like the most important thing to sort of develop for anyone is that once you're physically recovered on the ledge, which obviously is no issue, there needs to be some marker where you feel, yes, I am ready to step off. And go into autopilot mode.
Send.
Yeah, and send, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, that's it. That's our questions. I hope you've enjoyed today. And if you want to hear more from myself and Maddy on the mental games and our webinar that we presented on a while back, you can find those on the Lattice website. It's also accessible to all of you through the 365 subscription. So you can have access to all of the webinar library that we have for free as part of that subscription. And we will see you again on the channel very soon, and we hope you have a great week.